Hello there. All right, before we start the 5-6 notes, a couple things to note. Going back to what we did yesterday, today you're going to see a plus or minus sign as part of your work. And for today, you're actually going to be using the calculator. Your homework questions all give actual decimal answers, not an answer with the radical. So when you come down to something like 4 plus or minus 6 over 2, you are going to actually do 4 plus 6 over 2 and get 10 over 2, a nice answer of 5, and then you have to do the minus version as well. So you would get negative 2 over 2 or negative 1 for a final answer. So those are when they work out really well and pretty. Most of your work today does not work out really nice and pretty because what you're doing is the quadratic formula, and a lot of times you use the quadratic formula if it doesn't factor well, meaning the answers probably aren't pretty nice numbers. So in this case, you're going to come out with something like 5 plus or minus radical 3 all over 6. So that's where you're going to split it up, and you're going to do 5 plus radical 3 over 6 and 5 minus radical 3 over 6. So this being the difference between the two equations. Make sure when you do this on your calculator, super important, you do the top part, hit equals, and then divide by 6. Otherwise, it's going to read it as 5 plus radical 3 divided by 6 and 5 minus radical 3 divided by 6. So that would give you the wrong answer. You don't want that. Okay, so just something to think about. All right, for your 5-6 notes, here we are, completing these, or not completing the square, the quadratic formula. A lot of people like the quadratic formula. You plug in some numbers, you do some math. It's math you pretty much already know. It's nice. So when you have quadratic equations, it's in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Sometimes we can solve it by factoring. When it cannot be factored, we're going to solve it by completing the square, which is what we did yesterday, what your homework was about. Sometimes completing the square is not people's favorite, believe it or not. That was a joke. So in this case, you can always do the quadratic equation. Always works. So with factoring, sometimes you could sit there and try to think of numbers and it doesn't work. Completing the square sometimes gets really messy, as some of you have seen with fractions. Quadratic equation, it's nice. Learn it, love it, use it lots. All right, so you're going to read it negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And of course, your a, b, and c, a is the coefficient of x squared, b is the coefficient of x, and c is your constant term. Your first step, always get all terms on one side in standard form. Always, always, always. This just says one side. If you want to move everything to the right side and put 0 equals blah, 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 you go for it. It will work out the same. And make sure you talk about A, B, and C at the beginning, especially when you're first starting out. So like number 1. On number 1, off to the side, you might want to write A is negative 1, B is also negative 1, and C is 6. All right, so we are just replacing this stuff up here with those numbers. So let's see, x equals negative b. You've got negative 1. Some of you are just going to put positive 1 from the beginning. Good for you. Plus or minus the square root. B squared, so negative 1 squared, minus 4 times a, which is negative 1, and c, which is 6, all over 2 times negative 1. So for your homework, this is what I need to see. I need to see you writing that. From here, some people can get the work done in less steps than I'm going to write, but you should still show some. Negative 1, that's positive 1, plus or minus the square root of 1. Make sure when you're doing this, you do your b squared as one thing, and your minus 4ac as a separate thing. So I'm going to have 1, and then your minus 4ac has 2 negatives, so it turns into a plus 24. That's nice, hopefully you realize. So we've got x equals 1 plus or minus radical 25 over negative 2. And of course, at this point, hopefully we realize radical 25 is 5. So your two answers, you're going to have 1 plus 5 over negative 2, and also 1 minus 5 over negative 2. Going back here, 5 and 1 makes 6, 6 divided by negative 2 is negative 3. 1 minus 5 is negative 4 over negative 2 is 2. Oh, you couldn't see that, sorry. There you go. And all the other problems are done the exact same way. So if you get this, you're good. Good for you. Some of them work out to be special cases, and that's why I'm going to still talk about several of them here. All right, number two. Number 2 is not a special case. It works out. It's got a very messy answer though. So off to the side, A is 1, B is 9, C is negative 7. I'm going to switch colors so that we don't get lost in the other problem. All right, x equals negative b. That's the opposite of b. So b is 9, so negative 9 plus or minus square root b squared. I'm just going to write that, 81 minus 4 times a times c. Be super careful with your signs here. The negatives is typically where people are going to mess up. All over 2a. All right, we get negative 9 plus or minus the square root of. Again, you're going to do, we already did the b squared. Your minus 4ac, think of that as one chunk. So this turns into 81. You've got 3 negatives, so your overall number is negative 28 over negative 2. We've got negative 9 plus or minus. This right here, 81 minus 28, that is a lovely 53, right? Yes. All over negative 2. This is one of the ones where I started out with, it's not pretty. Square root of 53 is not a nice answer since 53 is not a perfect square. So you're going to put in your calculator negative 9 plus radical 53, hit equals, divide by negative 2. And according to my notes, we're going to get 0.859. That is one answer. And then don't forget to do the other one. Negative 9 minus radical 53 all over negative 2. And that will give us 8.140. And one more reminder, make sure you do the top, hit equals, and then divide by your negative 2.